But I think for now I'll do this because I'm not really sure how to do the settings there.
Sure.
So this is gonna be the first episode of this new series that I am starting, which is called Words and Worlds. And this is a series where I interview foreigners who are living in Indonesia or who have lived in Indonesia for a period of time and talk about your experiences here. And with regards to Benny has been learning Bahasa Indonesia for 2 months now?
Yep.
Full time. And we're going to talk about his experience and see the ins and outs of learning Bahasa. So, Benny, can you give a little introduction about yourself?
Sure. I've been a nomad for 22 years. I started 2003 to travel. I only spoke English because I studied engineering in university. But eventually I got into the process of learning the local language.
Okay.
And that transformed my experience, and I started to learn languages as I traveled. And then I made content and I wrote books about it.
Right.
And those books have been read by a lot of people, and I try to inspire others who want to learn languages.
Well, actually, when I started my language learning journey and my language YouTuber, career, I actually use Benny's blogs and like a lot of your articles and videos as references as well, and also as a way for me to optimize my language learning strategies. So this is the book, by the way. It's called Fluent in 3 months. This is a pirated version, so don't be like me and get the pirated version on Tokopedia. But yeah, this is really cool, actually. And what made you decide to go to Indonesia and learn Bahasa?
So I've been to Indonesia now 3 times. And one thing I prefer whenever I travel is to make the travel experience about meeting locals.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I have let my own standards down when it comes to Indonesia, because every time I've come here, I've just come to Bali. And to be honest, I only have one Indonesian friend, and she's sitting right next to me. And that's pathetic, because generally, when I go to the different countries, my priority is to meet locals, to make local friends.
Right.
And of course, using the language helps me to do that. But the previous trips to Bali, I was not learning Indonesian. So I feel like it's unfair for me to say I know Indonesia, because I don't know Indonesia.
Right.
I know Bali. And so next week, in just 5 days, I'm going to begin 4 months of deep travels through the rest of Indonesia. And I'm going to have to use my Indonesian, which I've only got 2 months of it, but it's just enough that I will be able to be an independent traveler, and it'll continue to improve from there. And hopefully I'll make some friends.
Right.
Because that's kind of the whole point. And I think getting out of Bali, I won't have a choice, because I'm not going to meet a lot of other bules whenever I go to most of the places.
Right. And especially, I mean, it's nice to be your only Indonesian friend here. However, I have also been told that I am quite a westernized Indonesian, so I am not really authentically Indonesian in that sense, you know?
Yeah, and I expect that. The experience of a lot of travelers is they may meet locals, but when you meet locals who speak English, there's a lot of things that change. Like they are, because you're experienced and you've lived in other countries like the Netherlands, you know how to interact with us in a way that is more similar to how we're used to interacting with ourselves.
Right.
And I know that a lot of that expectation is going to just disappear with most of the Indonesians I meet. Like what's happened to me a lot in my travels, like last year, I traveled through the Amazon for 3 months.
Right.
And I was the first foreigner these Brazilians, many of them, had ever met in their life.
Wow.
And I totally expect, even in a place like Jogja, that I'm going to be the first foreigner many people have ever interacted with. And that changes everything. So I know that, like, because you're so experienced talking to foreigners, you make adjustments.
Right.
And I'm going to meet a lot of people who don't make those adjustments.
Right.
Like when you spoke a little Indonesian to me, I had no problem understanding you. But when I've tried to speak to some others, they're not used to speaking to foreigners, so they just have like a machine gun of words in my face.
Yeah, that's gonna be quite a challenge, I can imagine, you know, because earlier when we were speaking in Indonesian for your video, I really had to adjust my speed.
Yep.
I had to adjust my choice of words.
Yeah, you were saying saya instead of aku.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, I would say you being in Bali and interacting with me, kind of like a westernized local, is a good stepping stone to start interacting with locals out there,
Yeah.
more locals out there. Okay. And do you find that Bahasa Indonesia is an easy language to learn?
So it has that reputation, absolutely. But generally, my philosophy in life is I don't like to designate things as difficult.
Right.
Because a big problem with that is it creates a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
If you decide any language you learn is hard, you're going to find the reasons why it's hard.
Right.
So obviously, Bahasa Indonesia has a lot of advantages. That it doesn't have tones, the grammatical features are easier than a lot of European languages, no masculine, no feminine. But, you know, there are some tricky things about it. Like whenever you have the prefix me before a word, it'll change the sound of the next word that comes after it.
Right.
And that's an adjustment that you have to make,
Right.
you know? So you could point out things that make it slightly more difficult, but I never think about that. Okay. It's not a challenge for me to overcome. A language is a tool. It's a resource for you to be able to communicate with people. So I don't like to think about it being easy or hard, because every language is going to be hard in its own way. Like I have a lot of vocabulary to learn. Even the easiest language in the world, you still have to learn lots of words.
Right.
So it's still going to be a process and a challenge. But of course, because of advantages Indonesian has, I'm definitely a lot further along now in my 2 months. Like the chat we just had, I wouldn't have been able to do that into 2 months into like my Korean project, for example. Absolutely. I'm further along. I can say a lot more, which is great because that means my experience when I travel Indonesia is going to be so much more rich.
Right, right. And do you have any expectations when you're finally starting your travel around Indonesia? Do you have any expectations how it's going to go interacting with locals or, you know, traveling around?
I don't like to have expectations because I feel expectations are linked to stereotypes.
Right.
Where you go in and you think these people are going to act this way, they're going to treat me that way. I do know just from the limited experience I've had with interacting with Indonesians that they're extremely friendly and very patient and very generous with words like lancar, that like lancar, sorry,
right,
lancar.
Right.
Like I uploaded a video at my 1 month point to TikTok, and all the comments are saying lancar, lancar. And in Europe, we would not very quickly say somebody's fluent unless they were very, very close to a mastery level.
Right, right.
So I appreciate that. It's very boosting to my confidence.
Right.
So I'm expecting people to be very friendly.
Right.
I've talked to a couple of other foreigners who've said a lot of people went out of their way to meet you and to maybe take a picture with you because you're the first white guy they've seen.
Right.
And I have had that experience in some other countries. When I traveled deep through India, I was also the first white guy a lot of them ever met. So some of the parallels might overlap with other countries I've gone to, which is why I really want to find out what's unique about my experience in Indonesia. And of course, I'm going to multiple places. So my experience in Western Java is going to be different to my experience in Sumatra. It's going to be different to Eastern Java. So I know it's a very complex, large country, and I wouldn't want to overgeneralize and say all Indonesians are this.
Right.
You know.
And I really respect you for that because sometimes I do fall into that trap of stereotyping, especially if I've only seen like a couple of people from a certain country, and then as much as I try not to, like the first instinct I find myself doing is that generalizing, you know? And so far, do you see anything unique already about the Indonesian culture? Let's say the 2 months that you're here?
Well, unfortunately, these 2 months that I've been here have not been about cultural integration.
Right.
It's all been about language studies. So I've been 8 hours a day by myself or just talking with a teacher online.
Right.
But like from at least interacting with a lot of people, that a lot of, at least in the service industry, people go out of their way to make sure I'm happy and like extremely friendly. So I do expect that, but that's only one very small aspect of a culture is the service industry. That's not really how people truly interact as friends.
Right.
So I don't really know what expectations to have, and that's why I'm starting this whole adventure is because I want to learn these things.
Right, right. What other industries would you like to experience more of in Indonesia besides hospitality or service?
I want to make friends.
Okay.
So I'm going to try and be social and go to events. And maybe like one thing, as you remember from the last time we talked, is I really like dancing.
Right.
So after I learned Korean, when I went to South Korea,
Right.
I went to K-pop dance lessons every day.
Crazy.
And that was one way I could meet people.
Wow.
So I don't know if I would do that necessarily in Indonesia, but some kind of a hobby that I would share with other people would be an opportunity for me to meet them. Obviously, as a tourist, I'm going to be interacting a lot with the hospitality industry, but I try to get off that as much as I can and make more authentic connections with people. So I don't know what that's going to look like, because how I socialize in each country is completely different depending on how they themselves socialize.
Right. I was actually a little bit nervous when he first came in and he wanted to shoot a video for his channel. I was a bit nervous that he's going to ask me to dance. Because I have a feeling you're a better dancer than I am, because I haven't danced in many, many years. So I was very nervous, just so you know.
Well, you saw it was just a video talking, like that's all I needed.
That's still within my comfort zone.
Yeah.
And are there any Indonesian dances that you would like to learn here? Because
God.
dance, for instance, is pretty famous as well.
Yeah. So I want to discover them. I want to see what there is, but I have no idea. So I'm going to get advice from people and see what I can learn.
You know what? I think one tip, if let's say you were to go to Yogyakarta or other places, like a bigger city, for instance, if you can show Indonesians that you can actually do a little bit of a K-pop dance, your videos would go viral.
Yeah.
You would surpass my fame. You would be like, oh, the bule guy who knows how to dance K-pop.
Sure.
So just one little tip.
Yeah, I might give it a try.
And so far, do you have any culture shocks after, having been here for a couple months?
Not yet, because in Bali and especially in Canggu, you're shielded from anything but Western culture.
Right.
You know?
Right.
Although I have at least begun to have lots of interactions online through my videos, loads of comments on my videos. And other than saying lanchar a lot, I'm starting to see a lot of people are going to call me Mr.
Oh,
Mr. And I think as I'm walking down the street, maybe the Gojek will slow down and say, "Hey, Mister."
Yeah.
So I think that's probably going to happen a lot. But in terms of other kinds of interactions, it's mainly I'm looking forward to seeing what's going to happen.
Wow. Oh, that's really nice that you don't really have any expectations and you're just really open to whatever possibility that's going to come. Actually, talk to me about AI, because the last time we had lunch, you told me you're using ChatGPT in a way that is really going to help you. Like speeds up your process of learning Bahasa.
Yep.
Talk to me about that.
So the thing about AI is there's pros and cons to it. I would still caution people to not expect it to be correct.
Okay.
It's not a good source of information yet.
All right.
And because of that, I tend to use it with things that it's okay if it hallucinates,
Right.
if it makes stuff up. So one of my major ways of using AI for that is using it to create mnemonics. Right. And we talked about this in the other video, but I try to think of a word that sounds like the word I want to learn. And the example I gave was pemerintah. And I asked ChatGPT and it told me that sounds like pay my rent. And I imagined a government agent asking me for taxes. And that makes me remember that word so much easier because it doesn't sound like government, but it sounds like something else that maybe makes me think of government.
Right.
And I got that idea from ChatGPT. And another thing is I have a prompt I prepared now that when I give it a word, it'll also give me an explanation of related words I can learn from that word. So with pemerintah, it gave me perintah, and I learned, okay, so I can like give orders, or I can use this extra word that I wouldn't have realized otherwise.
Right.
And it tells me that. So it gives me the root of the word and it gives me potential other uses.
Right.
And that expands my vocabulary instantly in that other direction. What else? There's lots of tricks like that. I think actually using AI for conversation is tricky because right now it's not at the stage where it's going to be quite equivalent to a human, but eventually it'll get there. Maybe in 1 year, maybe in 5 years. But the problem is when you're practicing speaking a language, part of the thing you have to learn is getting over your anxiety to actually interact with a real human. So even if AI was perfect in sounding exactly like a human, even using slang and everything, I still wouldn't have it replace my language teacher because I don't care about AI's feelings. I don't need to impress AI. So I could be the most confident person ever just talking to my phone, but as soon as a real human comes up to me, that confidence will evaporate. So you have to practice that. So I'm a bit skeptical with AI's ability to go in that direction. But there's lots of other things that it is very useful for. It's going to get more and more useful with time. I'm using deep research a little bit to help me with some ideas for things to do in my travels. And I specifically say, give me suggestions I wouldn't think of. And it kind of goes and finds a bunch of blog articles and does that research for me. But again, I follow that up with my own research because that's treading on the territory where it may be giving you less useful information. And some websites block their access to AI, so you're not going to be able to access those websites through your prompts.
Wow.
Yeah, because a lot of people don't want their data shared with AI. I know I have a blog that has suffered because of AI. I get less traffic on my website when people search for things and Google kind of steals my content and puts it in their AI. So I haven't, but I could put a little code on my site and say, no AI is allowed on my website. And if I did that, then ChatGPT would not give my information to people.
Wow.
So I decided I'm going to leave my information open because then more people can find my advice. But a lot of people cut that off. So it's why there are cons with AI. So I'm not anti-AI. I'm not like religiously devoted to AI. I'm a bit in the middle of skeptical, but still using it consistently.
It actually does give me quite some reassurance in the sense that I think I once read a book that within a couple of years, language learning is going to be obsolete because all of these translation devices will be so commonplace that this need of having to learn a language will just be...
No, absolutely not. Because the thing is, maybe within the next 1 or 2 years, it might reach the stage where it becomes somewhat useful for basic touristy exchanges, where you can say, where's the nearest supermarket and shove your phone in someone's face. But for the kinds of interactions I'm going to be looking for in Indonesia, those can't be replicated by technology. Like I need to be saying the words, I need to be making these connections with people. And then there's always the chance of something not working, you know? Maybe your internet goes down, the power goes off or something. And then if you've relied only on AI, then you're stuck in a country where you don't speak the language. So I don't think it can ever replace true language learning. I do think it will replace basic tourist interactions. Because it's good for that. That's very simple. But again, you get into kind of hallucinations and miscommunications that is the cause of technology. And I prefer when there's a miscommunication that it's 100% my fault. I don't want something else to give me extra miscommunication. So it's not going to replace it. And there's so many other things that like people who see a language so robotically, so academically, just see, you know, AI can translate this, therefore I don't need to learn the language. They miss the whole point of having skills in being able to speak a language. The communication skills, like, you know, immersion in the culture, all of these things cannot be emulated through technology.
Wow. I think it also is the same idea of like, why do I need to learn math? Because there are calculators everywhere, you know, that does all of these things. You know, but I think that's quite beautiful in the sense that you can never replace human connection, even with the most advanced forms of AI technology. You know, so it does make me feel pretty good because I've always thought like, my relevance is timed these days because with the advent of AI, people are probably not going to want to learn English anymore. You know, so yeah.
And keep in mind, people are still pushing back on some AI. Like I scroll a lot of social media myself. I use it to practice my languages as well. And I'm seeing a little bit more and more these AI influencers.
Right.
And the second I see them, I'm like, get out of my face.
Right.
I don't want content given to me by AI.
Right.
And like sometimes you'll see an AI face that's you can instantly tell it's fake. But a lot of videos have AI voices.
Right.
And
that does get annoying.
I'm sick of it. Like at first it was quirky, it was new, but now I'm like, this is getting into the territory of the dead internet theory.
Right.
You've heard of that?
No, I don't think so.
The dead internet theory says that we're getting to the point that more and more content we're consuming is AI, and you start to wonder, are actual humans making anything that I'm watching? And people are worried that a lot of articles are getting written by AI.
Yeah.
And so because of that, actual human content is going to become more rare and more valuable.
Yeah.
Just because it's so easy for someone to type into ChatGPT or something to make this content and put it out there, that people get lazy.
Right. I think one thing, I think there are two things I want to say about that. First is that even though ChatGPT has helped me so much in creating content this past couple of years, it does make me feel that when I write the script and I use ChatGPT's help to structure it and to create most of the content, I feel like I didn't internalize the content as much as I did if I were to write everything myself.
Yeah.
And that actually posed a problem when I was once I get to a point of filming. So when I film and I want to talk about it, I felt like I didn't own the topics as deeply as if I were to write it myself.
Yeah.
You know? And the second point I want to actually it's a question. It's that do you think this thought that you have is representative of the majority of consumers, or do you think it's because like maybe you're a little older? So
it depends. So maybe because I'm older, absolutely, and I've been consuming content for a long time, that I have a certain preference. But the other side of that is something we were talking about earlier. Is it's very lazy.
Right.
It's very easy to make stuff through AI,
Right.
and because of that, there's a certain amount of laziness to it.
Right.
And I instantly recognize a lot of AI content when I read it, that I can tell this is AI slop. There's a lot of ways that it kind of fills the gaps and like it's going to get better with time. It's maybe going to be harder to recognize that. But it just instantly makes me feel like this person doesn't care enough to put a little bit of effort to have their human voice interact with me in this.
Right, I understand.
But at the same time, it's so scalable. Like people can produce 50 articles in 5 minutes.
Right.
They can make a lot of videos. So more people are going to do that. And again, that makes me feel like the actual human stuff is going to be much more valuable.
Wow, okay. I do like that. In a way that it does make me feel that we're not going to get extinct and demolished by the robots eventually, you know? So, Benny, getting over the AI stuff right now, one of this goal of the series is to also introduce my audience to different cultures. And I would like you to talk a little bit about the culture of where you're from.
Yeah.
Ireland.
So, Ireland is usually kind of a forgotten country for a lot of people. Like a lot of people get it mixed up with Scotland.
I'm guilty of that.
Yeah. But it's a traditional Celtic culture.
Right.
So we have a lot of traditions that have survived over the years.
Right.
A lot of people don't realize Halloween comes from Ireland.
Oh, I didn't know
They
that.
think maybe it's American, but the only reason it was so popularized in America is because of Irish immigration to America. And Halloween represents the pagan New Year.
The what?
The pagan.
Oh,
and
okay.
because of that, it's one of the few pagan holidays that survived into Christianity. And a lot of the traditions of Halloween kind of come from this, that they believed you had to make a sacrifice and leave it on your door to keep the spirits away. And that's where trick-or-treating comes from.
Wow.
So a lot of that is kind of historically held in Ireland. And of course, in Ireland, we have our own language, the Irish language. And it's...
Do you speak it?
Yes. And I speak it at an intermediate level.
Wow.
Because Ireland spent a lot of time as part of the British Empire, it was actually illegal in some cases to speak Irish. So
Illegal?
Yes. So they made English the official language, and a lot of people lost the Irish language because of that. But since we became independent over 100 years ago, we've tried to gain back our own language. But what's interesting is that influences how we speak English.
Right.
And a lot of people don't even realize that the Irish accent and the words that we use come from an influence of the Irish language.
Okay.
And some parts of this make it a little bit easier, like we don't have the TH sound. So I would be more likely to say 33 and a third trees.
Okay.
Instead of 33 and a third trees.
Right.
And I actually couldn't make that sound until I was in my 20s.
Wow.
And I got teased because I was a mathematics teacher in America and my students made fun of me.
Wow.
So that makes it easier for people who are learning English, that you don't really have to worry about that sound.
So TH is actually one of the most difficult cluster consonants for a lot of Indonesian speakers, and not even just Indonesians. I think like also Italian, Spanish speakers, they have quite some difficulties pronouncing the or that. Yeah.
And another thing that's influenced from the Irish language is the way we speak, and this actually aligns with Indonesian, something we have in common with Indonesian, is we are less likely to say the words yes and no. So as an example, if you ask me, kamu bisa bicara Bahasa Indonesia, I might say bisa instead of ya.
Yes, I can. Yeah.
And in Ireland, if you say, can you speak Indonesian, we're less likely to say yes, and we're like, I can. And we do this with a lot, we repeat the verb of the question. Do you eat ice cream? I do. So we don't really say yes or no. And the reason for that is because the Irish language doesn't have a word for yes or no.
You actually don't have.
It's the same as many languages. Chinese, Mandarin, does not have a word for yes or no. The way those languages work is like it works in Indonesian in many cases. You repeat the verb of the question.
Wow, okay. Oh, I didn't know that. I
Yeah.
feel like Chinese has, I don't know the Mandarin word for yes, but
A lot.
is boo or something.
Boo means no, but technically it means not.
Right.
So you could reply with not, but you're better to say it with the verb, and technically you're saying I do not.
我不知道.
Yeah.
I do not know. Interesting. Okay. Oh, that's so cool. And other than that, do you know any other similarities between, let's say, the Irish culture and the Indonesian culture, for instance?
Well, in Ireland, we have a philosophy that's very famous, where we say a stranger is just a friend you haven't met yet.
Wow.
So in Ireland, it's very typical that when you meet people, they want to talk to you and find out where you're from. And you won't find that as much, like as you know when you were in the Netherlands. It's not necessarily they want you to be your best friend very quickly. You know, they have a different understanding of friendship. Yeah. So even though Ireland is a northern European country, it still has that same kind of sense of wanting to interact with people and the sense of family being important. Like when I traveled to America, I was very surprised that a lot of my friends hadn't seen their family since Thanksgiving, their main holiday. They see them once a year. Or Christmas. Yeah. Whereas in Ireland, we see our family all the time. Family is very important, like in Indonesia.
Right.
So that part is going to be a little bit easier for me to integrate with in the culture. And I'm sure there's plenty of other things that I'm going to discover because I've barely scratched the surface of Indonesia.
Right. And I can imagine that because you've been quite nomadic, you've been exposed to so many cultures and languages. What about you that you preserve? What is something that is so, let's say, Irish about you that you still preserve to this day, despite your exposure to other languages?
Yeah, because I've spent over half my life now outside of Ireland.
Right.
And I I do like that thing I said about stranger being a friend I haven't met yet. I think in Ireland we have a very casual culture. So we don't put people up on a pedestal.
Okay.
And for instance, even police officers, we don't get scared of police officers. We like hang out with them as our friends, kind of thing. Whereas in other cultures I've been, there's that very formal, you treat this person very differently.
Right.
So my tendency is always to be way more casual and laid back. And I always have to emphasize in my head when I'm in a different culture, I have to remind myself, you have to be formal, you have to maintain distance. You know, you don't like pat someone on the back and say, hey, friend, how are you? Sometimes you have to do that. So I have to consciously remind myself.
Okay.
Depending on the country, it's very different in some countries. Some other countries, they're even closer than in Ireland. And I have to get used to that. And that's different. Like when I was in Brazil last year, what is different there is they're actually more close. So people always have like their hand on your shoulder and keeping eye contact and being very close when like it's got nothing to do with romance or anything. They're always much closer.
No sense of personal space.
Yes.
Very little.
So that kind of the distance of personal space changes in every country. And I always have to remind myself because my default standard of what it is in Ireland is likely to be different. But there's plenty of things that are that I've tried to maintain from my personality through my travels. I try to be optimistic, but you know, I realize that there's lots of challenges around the world, and part of that is just my personality, not necessarily specifically Irish. But yeah, I'm very curious to see what I would enjoy and what would be an adjustment for my time in Indonesia.
I do find you to be very optimistic in the sense that, you know, even when we were talking about the most difficult thing about Indonesia, or not, you don't like to think about it as difficult, or even let's say when I ask you, what do you think about the negative stereotypes about a certain ethnic group here in Bali, for instance. And you don't like to give me like, oh, I don't like this about this people. I do really respect you so much for that, and it's something that I could also learn myself. You know? So do you think this is also because you have been exposed to so many cultures that you develop this level of tolerance?
Yeah, because initially I did have that temptation to decide these people are wrong, these people are mean, and I hate them all. But I've spent enough time living in some places that I've had to adjust, and I have to realize, why are they different? And is it something maybe that I'm doing? And I think as travelers, sometimes the temptation is to be, they're all wrong, I'm right. The way we do it in my country is the only way. And because I've lived in so many places and seen it actually works when you do it a completely different way, I try to bring that perspective. And I've been in places that were an adjustment, and I've told you, for instance, when I was in Paris, I found it very difficult to make friends with Parisians. And at first, the stereotype that Parisians are mean, that was tempting to just say, that's the reason, let's give up. But I realized after a certain amount of time that I was actually contributing by bringing my Irish friendliness. I actually needed to be a bit more formal. And you need to be very humble. And like if you're speaking French, you need to kind of show less confidence. Because I like to show confidence when I speak a language, it makes other people at ease. But when I was in a place like Paris, they have such pride in the French language that they want to see that you are showing the language that same reverence. So if you're confidently speaking it, even while you're making mistakes, it feels like you're insulting the language from their perspective. That's not true in most places I've ever been. Everybody loves it when I try to speak their language.
That is true, yeah.
But in Paris specifically, I adjusted. And I would like apologize for my French, and I would change my body language to be way less like waving my arms about and being like, hey, I'm Irish, let's have fun. And
you can do that.
Well, to a certain degree, like there's lots of fun Parisians, but I just mean like as you are adjusting to their culture, it just made that seem apparent to me. So I've learned that in many places. Like I'm tempted to see this group of people and decide they're mean, but maybe there's something I'm not realizing. Maybe there's something that they have to deal with while they're in this country, which is frustrating.
Right, okay.
And you have to empathize that we're all humans, we're all going through stuff, and it's not fair to just decide this person is pure evil, you know?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I think it also fits a lot of the stuff that I hear about, a lot of like the things that I hear about Parisians as well, about being very proud of their language. And if you were to speak French and you kind of butcher it, they don't really appreciate it. Whereas in other cultures, other countries where they're a lot more welcoming about the fact that you were just learning a couple of words from the language, they're a lot more, let's say, happy.
Yeah.
Even if you make a lot of mistakes in the language. You know?
But now when I go to Paris, I have a positive experience.
Okay.
And it's because I make adjustments to their culture rather than assigning them, they need to fit my expectations.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, I'm the guest in somebody else's country.
Right.
So as I go through Indonesia, I completely expect I will run into problems.
Right.
I will run into things that initially I don't like.
All right.
But I always I'm going to try and reframe that and see, like, what are the advantages of doing it this way? Right. Initially, it may not be something I'm comfortable with, but why is it historically like that?
Right,
and
okay.
I've been trying to read up on the history of Indonesia and understanding a little bit about the cultural side of things to prepare me for that mental mind shift.
Right, okay. And do you know any problems that you would expect to happen in your interactions with Indonesians?
Not really. I mean, I've been to enough places that problems I might have had if it were the first country I ever visited may be an adjustment. But I've gotten over different culture changes so many times that I'm much more flexible now. So I don't really expect too many problems.
Okay, wow. So we've been talking for about almost 40 minutes now. It's probably time to wrap it up for the first video. Thank you so much, by the way, for being my guest in this kickoff series. Do you have any words that you would like to say to my Indonesian audience before your travels?
Before my travels, I'm really looking forward to getting to know your country, your culture, and more of your language. I know it can be disappointing if all foreigners have a certain expectation that they only see Indonesia as Bali, and it's such a huge country. There's so many more things to it. So hopefully, as I share my experience with other foreigners, I can show them there's a lot more to Indonesia than meets the eye. And
if do you want to tell them like your travels, your
Yeah, sure.
start off in Java?
I'm gonna fly to Jakarta, and then I'll be getting the train all the way through the country. So all I know for sure is I'm gonna spend 1 month in Jogja, and then after that, I'm being pretty flexible because if I really like a place, I might stay longer.
Right.
So I haven't booked anything, but I know I have 4 months to see what I can do. So I'm likely going to Sumatra, Sulawesi, maybe spending more time in Java and other places. So I'm not 100% sure, but of course people can follow me and find out.
This is his Instagram.
Yeah, I have my English and Indonesian Instagram and TikTok and everything. So hopefully you guys will enjoy this Bule's perspective. There's plenty of other foreigners who've traveled in Indonesia, but I've been traveling for 22 years, so I might have a slightly different perspective on understanding the culture.
Yes, there you go. So if you guys want to welcome Benny in your city or even in your home, you can contact him here. This is his Instagram. And yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this first series. If you like this series, let me know in the comments and we can have a little bit of a conversation. And yeah, also show me through the likes and the subscribes as well, because that also helps me and that helps the algorithm to show you more of this video. Until then, take care and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.
Bye bye.